Today we're talking about recovering what the enemy has stolen from the end time generation. So our memory text is 1 Samuel 38. Pursue, for thou shalt surely overtake them, and without fail recover all. So with that, we'll begin our presentation. We're living in the end times, characterized by spiritual deception and intense opposition. The enemy, which is Satan, seeks to steal, kill, and destroy. John 10:10. We can find ourselves in a Ziklag moment, returning to find our spiritual lives, families, and truth burned and taken captive. But there's a promise, and that promise is that God wants us to recover all. The key scripture, John 10:10. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. We're in a very, and I believe literally, even this year, this time, we're in a key turning point. We're in a very key point in biblical history, in in history, in our own personal lives. And I've been going through quite a bit the last little while that really convinced me to want to kind of make this presentation today. So, First Samuel 30, and we're going to read the first 19 verses, but we're going to take them one at a time. And I want you to think about your personal life, and I want you to think about your spiritual life, and I want you to think about the times we're living in, but all three. So this is when David, now a little bit of background is that where was David in Samuel chapter 29? Well, in chapter 29, the first Samuel 29, he was living with the Philistines. Not only was he living with the Philistines, he had joined up with their army. Him and his 600 men, they were rampaging and plundering on behalf of the Philistines. So imagine this is someone who's been anointed to be the future king, who's been pursued by Saul, and he gets to a point where he just kind of gives up. He's had it. This is the same guy that they were singing songs about. Saul has his thousands and David has tens of thousands, and he compromised, and now he's joined the enemy's camp, and they're just about to go to war actually with Judah, and David's there volunteering and quite disappointed when they tell him that that they don't trust him. We think you might turn in battle, and that'd be a great victory for your king if you in the middle of the battle turned and started to try and attack us. So we don't trust you. What's a Hebrew doing with us? And it's time for you to go back to your people. And in life, sometimes we get weary of the battle, but when we get too weary and we begin to actually compromise and just live to the world, for the world, in the world, then we hit the same spiritual low that David did. But what made it worse is that he was returning home, and this is the grace of God, that because if he would have joined that army, well, first of all, he would have been warring against God's people, but he would have been out in for months and months and months. But something was happening back home that had nothing to do with the Philistines, had nothing to do with Judah. There's another invading army out to work, attacking everybody. And that was the Amalekites. And imagine that you're coming home and you're looking ahead, and you know where your home is. You know where your wife and your family is. You know where, and it's right where that smoke is. You see this distant smoke, but that's where your family is. That's where all of your possessions, all of your people. That's and not just for you, but for 600 men that are with you. It's right there. And you see it's all on fire. So 1 Samuel 31:3 says, it came to pass when David and his men were coming to Ziklag on the third day, so they traveled for 2 days to get here, that the Amalekites had invaded the south and Ziklag, which is where David was living at the time, and smitten Ziklag and burned it with fire, and had taken the women captives that were therein. They slew not any, neither great or small, but carried them away and went another way. And praise God for that, because at that time, even when David was out with these invaded armies, they slew the women and children too. So anyway, so they took the women and children. So David and his men came to the city, and behold, it was burned with fire, and their wives and their sons and their daughters were taken captive. So these men of war, these great men of war, come home, and they're very, their own families were all gone, and all their homes burned down. So the Amalekites had raided the city, burned it with fire, and taken everyone captive. How did they get there? Like I said, compromise. They were out in another country, living for the world, kind of like paid mercenaries, and they'd compromised. They just became men of war. There was no glory in it anymore. They weren't fighting for their nation. They weren't fighting for Judah. They'd compromised and using their skills just in the world, and that's how they got to where they were. But when they got back, um, this is what they came across. And great personal loss can result in greater spiritual loss. And many of us have experienced that, even the loss of someone, of the death of somebody, or, some other type of really deep loss. You see people, giving up their Christianity, or giving up their, they start to lose their spiritual fervor, or something happened really bad. They lose their reputation, they lose their joy, their family peace, some great loss, something they weren't expecting, or something that came upon them happens. And because of that loss, they suffer spiritual loss. So, and that's, in corporately in the church, as a living generation, the purity of Christ's biblical truth has been stolen from our churches, our community, and our end time generation. I want to tie the personal together with the corporate. The world we live in today, there's been great loss. There's been great loss in the biblical truth, and in our generation. But personally, I want you to think, as well about because this is the recipe back. This is what God instructs us to do when we are in this situation. It says, verse 4-6, David and his men wept until they had no strength left to weep. They cried themselves till they were exhausted. David's about 30 years old at this time, because the very next chapter is when Saul is killed, and the chapter after that is when David's anointed king over all of Judah. And we know that happened when he was 30. Um, and uh, so he reigned 30 years, or 40 years over Judah, but 7 years later he was king of all of Israel as well. So he's very close to becoming king. He's very close to the death of Saul. And his men are about the same age as him. So they're all sort of young men, young men with young families. And they wept until they had no strength left to weep. They're so bitter in soul that they spoke of stoning David, because he's the one that led us away. And now we're back here, and all we had is lost. So it's this deep despair and this division amongst them now. And, we have to be warned that the enemy uses despair to paralyze us and turn us against one another. All of a sudden, this great thing happens, and who are you going to blame? What, this is your fault. This is, and the response, 1 Samuel 30:4-6. David and his men went and wept until they had no strength left to weep. So bitter. Well, anyway, it's the same repeat. But what happened was, it says in 4-6, but David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. So it's a critical step before the pursuit, because first of all, it says he strengthened himself, because we cannot recover on our own strength or wisdom. So we have to stop shifting through the ashes and start looking up to God. And it's, like I said, it's it's the only place we can turn. That's when we weep so much we have no strength, then there's a time to stop weeping and a time to look up and say, okay, I have just suffered great loss, because God wants to return it. He wants us to get it back. And it's, well, so I'll explain a little bit better here as we go along. So it says in verse 78, and David said to Abiathar the priest, Ahimelech's son, I pray thee, bring me hither the ephod. And he brought thither the ephod to David. So remember that's the apron and so he's speaking to the high priest. And in that apron, in that ephod, is the way that they're able to inquire of God. And so David, put on that high priest's apron and inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I pursue after this troop? Shall I overtake them? And he answered him, pursue, for thou shalt surely overtake them, and without fail recover all. So David strengthens himself in the Lord, and he knows that he hasn't sought the Lord's direction in a long time. He didn't seek it when he was in with the Philistines. He didn't seek it on his way back home. But now he's seeking the Lord's direction. And now he's saying, look at, should I go after this troop that took my family, and should I pursue them, and and will I overtake them? And he's told, yes, you will overtake them, and you will recover all. So he has two specific questions. Shall I pursue this raiding party? Will I overtake them? So we don't move without clear direction, but we also don't go chasing after the enemy. That's kind of misunderstood here. We pursue what was lost, and then by pursuing what was lost, you overtake the enemy, and all will witness your recovery of it in time. So in other words, we all have things in our life that we lost. Say, we lost our health, we lost our our um our reputation, etc. We don't get it back by let's just use the word reputation. So we don't get it back by pursuing those that help ruin our reputation or do whatever. We go about it by pursuing those things that regain our reputation. Or if we lost family members through fighting and quarreling and whatever, we go pursue our family again, and we go, we pursue the things we lost. And that's God's instructions, is to pursue those things we lost. And eventually we'll, through God's help, we get them back. And we get them back, and we don't even have to tell anybody, because they'll see it. It's obvious, so when it's kind of laid out here in the remaining 9 to 19. We're just going to go through it, and then we'll put it all together. But so first of all, he comes back. He finds this raiding army. He's told to go out and pursue. So verses 9 to 19 start off with 9 to 13. So David went, he with 600 men that were with him, and they came to the brook Besser, where those that were left behind stayed. So he had started off with 600. but 200 were just so exhausted they couldn't carry on. So he left them near this brook where where there's provisions there. He left them to guard, some of their stuff that could come back. The other 400 men could come back there if they needed to, like a little camp. But he and the 400 men, for 200 people abode behind, which were too so faint they could not go over the brook Besser. And they found an Egyptian in the field and brought him to David and gave him bread, and he did eat, and they made him drink water. So they found this guy in really, really bad shape. And they gave him a piece of cake of figs and 2 clusters of raisins. And when he had eaten, his spirit came again to him, for he had eaten no bread nor drunk any water 3 days and 3 nights. And you can't go without water for more than 3 days, really. Um, uh, food you can go with longer, but water 3 days and 3 nights is pretty close to dying. And David said unto him, To whom belongest thou? And whence art thou? So where are you from? Who do you belong to? He said, I am a young man of Egypt, servant to a servant to an Amalekite. And my master left me because 3 days ago I felt sick. So if you're sick, I just leave you behind. We don't need to carry you. You're just a servant. So he left him behind with no food, no water, and basically left him to die. We made an invasion. So he's telling David, what's happened. We made an invasion upon the south of the Cherethites and upon the coast which belongs to Judah and upon the south of Caleb. So he's telling them that they raided everywhere. And then they told him, we burned Ziklag with fire, which of course where David's from. And David said to him, Can thou bring me to this company? And he said, this is a young Egyptian man saying to David, Swear unto me by God that thou wilt neither kill me nor deliver me into the hands of my master, and I will bring thee down to this company. And when he had brought him down, behold, there was spread abroad upon all the earth, eating and drinking and dancing, because of all the great spoil that they had taken out of the land of the Philistines and out of the land of Judah. So while the Philistines and Judah were getting ready to go to war with each other and set up their camps, these guys come along and they raided both of those countries. And they took great spoils from all these guys that were left their home to be all gathered together on one side versus the other. They're gathered. They'd all left their homes and their little villages. And the Amalekites came in and went to those villages and towns where they had left their wives behind and their food, and they took it all. They took all their food, all their wives. They took everything. So they were so engorged with this great spoil they had that they were just feasting and partying by the time David got there. And said, and David smote them from the twilight even till evening of the next day, and escaped not a man of them, save 400 young men which rode upon camels and fled. So there's a group that got away, but those are the ones that had some mobility. The rest of them were all they killed every one of them. And David recovered all that the Amalekites had carried away. So not just his own stuff, his own family, but everything from all those villages. It's like plundering 20 to 30 villages at one time. And David rescued his 2 wives. And there was nothing lacking to them, neither small nor great, neither sons nor daughters, neither spoil nor anything that they had taken to them. David recovered all. So everyone got there's no children that were missing, there's no wives that were missing. They got all their stuff back, but they got this great provisions also, and it shows later, in the chapter that how David gave all those provisions to all kinds of people in Judah, to different communities, to different, to everyone that had been faithful to David. He took the spoil and gave to them as well. So David acted immediately on God's word, and the process involved perseverance. There's 200 men that were too exhausted to cross the brook, but others had to keep going, had to keep persevering. Guidance. They found an Egyptian slave who led them to the enemy camp. Timing. They attacked when the enemy was feasting and unconcerned. The Lord's timing is always perfect. And God provides the strength to keep going and the intelligence needed for the victory. The spoils were near immeasurable. So there's a strategy. There's things that have happened. They had a, God's timing was perfect. All this, is all part of the divine intervention when God says, look, go back and get what was taken from you. That's our key message today. He didn't act, um, rashly. He prayed. He asked for guidance, but he had lost. He had suffered great loss. He had separated from the enemy, and God said, "Go back and get what was taken from you." And that's what we're instructed as well. I want to come to that. Restoring the truth, reclaiming the biblical truth. Recover all includes the restoration of foundational, uncompromised biblical truth that the enemy has watered down or stolen in modern culture. We must recover the authority of Scripture, the true nature and meaning of salvation by grace alone, the eternity and goodness of the covenant law of God. This is part of the plunder we're instructed to take back because it all comes back to, and this lesson through David is there's a personal lesson and there's a corporate lesson. And the lesson for us all is Satan has stolen from us something or some things that we cannot be afraid to want to get back. We can't say, oh, it's too late, or it's too late to get my health back, or to he's stolen from us from the beginning. And it's and he's taken time away from us and wasted years and all kinds of stuff that he's taken that we need to ask the Lord to have him give back to us, to restore to us. It's because that's what Christ wants to do personally. But the message corporately for us as a people, as a generation, is everything that Satan has stolen from the beginning, Christ is going to recover it all. And as an end time generation, we need to be part of that, sharing the spoils with the rest of the world that maybe doesn't know it. And nothing was lacking to them, neither small nor great, neither sons nor daughters, neither spoil nor anything that they had taken to them. David recovered all. God's restoration of all will be complete when we follow his directions as given in Revelation of his word. We won't just survive, but thrive and regain everything that's been lost. And this is where we look at the bigger picture. David went to recover from the thief who stole and from the enemy. And it says very clearly in John 10:10, Jesus said, "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." Satan is described as a thief who steals from God's people, whether it be their peace, their joy, their purpose, their spiritual inheritance. Jesus, however, came to restore what was lost and give abundant life. At the very beginning, Genesis 3, in judgment, Satan is the form of the serpent, or in the form of the serpent, deceived Adam and Eve, leading to their loss of their inheritance in their intimate relationship with God and their dominion over creation. This act of deception is the first instance of Satan stealing from humanity and the first prophecy of man's restoration of all that was lost through the redemption of Christ. It's not a coincidence. This goes back to the beginning. And it's repeated over and over again. But this is the purpose that the Lord said, I'll put my enmity between thy seed and the woman's seed. This from the beginning, the whole purpose of Satan is to steal from God and steal from man, and to take it. And the purpose of God is to restore it, to restore what was lost and give abundant life in place of that what was stolen. Satan is the enemy of the Lord and his people. 1 Peter 5:8 says, be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, which is your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. That's Satan's whole objective. It's nothing subtle about it. Satan is described as an adversary who actively seeks to harm and destroy God's people. Revelation 12:9-10, Satan is called the accuser of our brothers and sisters, who accuses believers before God day and night. His role as an enemy is clear in his attempts to oppose God's purposes and his people. So that's the enemy that's stolen from us and stolen from God. But that's so we've got to be clear that behind everything is that one principle. Who is the enemy and what is he taken? And are we supposed to then not desire to have it back in our lifetime? We're just supposed to wait to the very end? Or are we allowed to be encouraged to get our reputation back now, or uh, our family peace now, or our resolution with our brother, or anything else that we've lost due to what Satan robbed us of during our lifetimes. Even if we're the ones that made the mistake, even if we're the one that tempted by Satan, we're the ones that were in the wrong. It was Satan that robbed us of whatever we had before. And it's only the Lord that can restore those things and restore them now, not have to go to the grave without them, not have to live this miserable, a life of lacking and of especially in relationships with others and in the way, well, just in everything, every way. Pursuing recovery what was stolen. 1 Samuel 38. David asked the Lord, shall I pursue after this troop? Shall I overtake them? The Lord responds, pursue, for thou shalt surely overtake them, and without fail recover all. The passage directly instructs David to pursue and recover what the enemy has stolen, serving as a model for believers to act in faith to reclaim what has been lost. I will restore you, Joel 2:25. I'll restore to you the years that the locusts have eaten. This verse refers to God's promise of restoration and reflects his desire to restore what has been stolen, including our wasted time. We may have spent 20 years, on our path, towards our current journey, but wasted a lot of time in that time. And now that we have this this opportunity, this place we're at today, then wouldn't it be nice for God to restore those years, give us that many more years or not that many more years, but that much more joy in our everyday to make up for all those lost time. I restore to you the years that the locusts eaten. What was famine, maybe it was spiritual famine, I'll now give you spiritual blessing. I'll give you a spiritual feast. There's so much I want to give to you that, that was stolen and returned to you. Matthew 16:19 says, I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosened in heaven. This verse empowers believers to take authority in spiritual matters, including reclaiming what the enemy has stolen. Ephesians 6:10-18. Paul instructs believers to put on the full armor of God to stand against the schemes of the devil. This passage emphasizes spiritual warfare and the active role believers must take in resisting the enemy and reclaiming victory. So I guess in all this, sometimes I find that we're too passive in um, in seeking, the full armor of God, the faith. We're not really. It seems like we don't really want to enter the spiritual warfare. We just kind of want to be left to the sidelines, so we don't have to, be in any danger of being in a warfare because warfares can be dangerous. But it's not our warfare; it's the Lord's warfare, and it's not our armor; it's the Lord's armor. And He wants to arm us completely from head to toe, and He wants us to be able to receive what was stolen from us. And what it really is faith. He wants us to receive that faith, that un a faith with no doubt, a faith with such victory and such sureness in mind that that and what for? Just for us to have it ourselves? No, so that we will be able to pass that faith on to others in this last call. That because those others are who God's calling. And we can't give something unless we receive it. We can't give somebody else faith unless we've fully received it. And so it's a really deceptive world. It's gone on for a long, long time. And there's a lot of doubt to overcome in a lot of people because the enemy has stolen, what rightfully belongs to God, has stolen the truth from the people, even the people in the churches. And we just have to, and even in our own lives, I mean, it can be so devastating to have something bad happen, and all of a sudden, like I said, your spiritual fervor goes down, your everything, you start to give up. When God says, do the opposite, you know, don't rush off in one direction or the other. Take your time, pray, and then don't chase the enemy because that's useless to go try and chase after Satan and or his minions, or to go after those that ruined your reputation. Or what it means by that is to pursue the things that were lost. If you lost your reputation, pursue the things that will regain your reputation. Not with the old people because they'll never ever accept you. But we live in a world of second chances. And if you just get off your feet and try again, then you'll regain your reputation, this time through the Lord, this time through what the Lord brought you through to, if you've lost your family or you've lost, something else like that was of great value to you, then, pursue those things, pursue to regain those things, through the Lord. So, but as a church, it's um, it, it's a key time. It's a time, a foretold time, a prophesied time, and so we need the full armor. We need, and we also need to be unafraid to get back what was stolen in terms of biblical faith. David's life. So David defeated the Amalekites, and he recovered all that was stolen and ensured that no one was left behind. His victory was complete, and he shared the spoils with others. Compare that to the ministry of Jesus. Jesus defeated the ultimate enemy, Satan, through his death and resurrection, securing eternal victory for humanity. He came to rescue and redeem all who were captives of sin and death. And what about the end time generation? The end time generation is called to walk in the victory of Christ, reclaiming what the enemy has stolen: faith, truth, and spiritual inheritance. We're also called to share the spoils of salvation and restoration with others, bringing them into the kingdom of God. That's the whole thing. The spoils. I mean, when David had gained everything back for himself, he had way too much for himself. It was overflowing and for all of his men. And so he gave those spoils to all of Judah, to all the kingdom, even before he became king. And that's what what God, when he gives us overabundance, when he gives us more resources than we need, it's for that reason, so that we can use those things to bring others into the kingdom. If he gives Bible explorations more resources, I mean, now, I mean, it's great. We have, new speakers, and we have new things, joining together and all working in the same direction. That's so that it'll be shared in more places by more people. And, it's when there's an abundance given, it's for a reason. It's because the share of the spoils. So personally, if we're ready personally to pursue some things, identify what the enemy has stolen from you. Peace, joy, truth, relationship, purpose, and then strengthen yourself in the Lord. You know, inquire. Do not chase the enemy, but reclaim that which was stolen from you. So you pursue what was stolen from you. You do the things through God to get those things back. Claim the promise, and we overtake them and recover them through faith and obedience in Christ. And in due time, others will see it when we get our reputation back, when we get our family members back, when we get our peace back, when we get our joy back. People will see it. I mean, it's just such an evil world that sometimes you can't help but being robbed of your joy, robbed of your peace. But people see it when you get it back. And it may not come back from the same thing or the same source that it was taken from. But if you just trust God and don't give up and say, Lord, the enemy has stolen my joy. The enemy has stolen my peace. I just ask you to bring my joy back, or to bring my peace back. It may not be from anything related to how it was stolen, but something completely unrelated, to how it's returned. You may lose a family member. And so, you're not going to see that family member in this lifetime. You'll see them at the resurrection. But that loss may come back to you in another way. So God brings in somebody else who, maybe needs you, or someone else that, is a new relationship that needs your love and your attention or whatever. But it'll be brought back to you. And think about Job. And Job lost everything, and including his children. And what a very unique thing it says in Job is that God gave him back double, everything. Uh, um, and and he gave him back his children. So is that through the resurrection, or is that through new children? But he got back double what he lost. And it's just, God is so gracious and so merciful, and he doesn't want us to have our joy taken away. Doesn't want us to have our peace taken away. Doesn't want the truth of the Bible taken away, relationship taken away. And he wants us not to want it either. He wants us to demand it back from Satan, but not directly, through the Lord. I would like, Lord, I pray to the Lord to return what the enemy has stolen from me. I don't speak to the devil himself. I don't try and chase the enemy or his minions. I speak to the Lord to say, Lord, you know, I want to pursue the things that were stolen from me. I want to have, you uh, help me, help return them to me. And that's where the faithfulness comes in. And he will. To command, pursue the promise, for you shall overtake them, and without fail recover all. So God doesn't want us to chase the enemy. He guarantees the outcome if we just follow his lead and purpose, or and pursue what the enemy has stolen from us. So it's like, again, I keep saying, we pursue what we lost. We ask God to help pursue what we lost, what the enemy's taken from us. And that victory is already secured in Christ. That's on a personal basis, personal thing, because we spend too much of our time satisfied. Okay, we know Jesus is coming. We know at that time, God will restore all. And I just see sometimes we spend too much of our time afraid to ask for those things now, not in some greedy or selfish way, but just in a way where you know where it's God, God willing, God what God wants. So, if you lost your joy, God doesn't want you to sit here till He returns without any joy. You know, he suffered a terrible loss that took away your joy. Okay, now we go to God and say, I suffered a terrible loss. It's taken away my joy. I ask you, Father, please to recover what was taken, what the enemy stole from me. And that's the step. And then from there, we just obey and follow and pursue what the Lord puts in front of us. And what I really want to speak about is this corporate, this end time pursuit, this end time thing, because it's a big, big deal. It's a really big deal. And one thing we have to understand that I haven't really talked about much, in fact, just prior to me speaking, it was mentioned in the geological way. But anyway, prophecies are cyclical. Biblical prophecies have an immediate fulfillment, a progressive fulfillment, and a final fulfillment. This pattern shows how prophecy unfolds over time, with each fulfillment being a foreshadowing or precursor to the ultimate realization of God's plan. So, for example, when in chapter 3 of Genesis, the prophecy of the seed of the woman, its first fulfillment is through Seth, through through the godly line of that went from Adam all the way to Noah, all the way through to David, to Abraham, to David, right to Mary and Joseph. So the first fulfillment of the prophecy was after Cain had killed Abel, and the newborn son was the first of the line of the all that went right through to the Messiah. But that seed kept increasing in fulfillment through Abraham, and then through well, actually first through Noah, then through Abraham, then through all the patriarchs, and it kept talking about the seed, then even through David, where David became the first king. So but it all led to the greater fulfillment, which was Christ. And even with Christ, there's messianic prophecies that were fulfilled at the cross and at the resurrection, but there are still others about the returning king, etc., that are fulfilled at the end. So you see that prophecy is cyclical because it has multiple layers of fulfillment, each one pointing to a greater and more complete realization of God's plan. This pattern reveals God's sovereignty over history and his ultimate purpose to restore all things through Jesus Christ. This whole thing is about restoration. So, what end time believers are called to live with this expectation, knowing that the final fulfillment of prophecy will bring about the complete restoration of God's kingdom. So that's how big a deal it is. When the disciples lived at the time of Christ, It was the second biggest time of prophetic fulfillment because it was Christ's first event. But his second event is the fulfillment of all. That's the time we're living in. That's how big a deal it is. And that's how big the expectation is for the restoration of all things. See, man, the secular man doesn't see any of this. They see a straight line in history, from whatever they think it started till today. Just this king, this kingdom, this whatever. No repetition in there, no, you know, but God's people see prophecy. They see it's cyclical. They see the fulfillment and the continued fulfillment, which gives them confidence of the next fulfillment. So, we in Revelation 11:1, and I'll be ending on these notes. We've been studying, you know, because we're told in Revelation 10, Revelation 11, we're told what to study and told how to study it and exactly what to do. And it says in Revelation that those who not just hear the word but do it are those that sorry, receive the blessings. So Revelation 11:1, which we repeated many times, and there was given me a reed like unto a rod. And the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God, and the altar, and them that worship therein. So that's everything to do with the tabernacle and the pattern and the covenant. We in Exodus 34:27, Moses was told to write this book of the covenant, as the Lord would write the words of the Ten Commandments on the tablets. Moses was to write the words that God would share with him on the mountain. It wrote those words for the next 40 years of his life. Everything the Lord showed him or revealed to him, he wrote about. And that's in the covenant law, the book of the covenant. That's put all how to build the tabernacle, how to build the furnishing, how to worship. All these laws, all these commandments are in this book of the covenant. And the Lord said to Moses, write thou these words. For after the tenor or after the pattern of these words, I have made a covenant with thee and with Israel. And when Moses was taking his last breaths, after 40 years, when they're about to cross into the promised land, it came to pass when Moses had made an end of the writing of the words of this law in a book, this book of the covenant, until they were finished, that Moses commanded the Levites, which bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord, saying, Take this book of the law, this book of the covenant code, place it beside the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, so that it may remain there as a witness against you. In other words, it's going to, the law is always going to be before you or against you. If you break the law, it's going to be against you. If you obey the law, it's going to be for you. So that's what this book of the covenant was. And we've studied this book of the covenant. We've studied particularly the tabernacle. We started with the most holy object and the most holy part and the very first thing given to Moses is the Ark of the Covenant, containing the commandments and the mercy seat on top of it, which was used only for one thing, one day a year, the most holy day, the most holy place, the most holy high priest would come into that area, and not without the blood of the lamb, and he would sprinkle it upon the mercy seat to make what? To make restoration, to fulfill that promise that Daniel spoke of, in this 70-week promise, the promise of the cleansing, the atonement, one that the Lord promised in the garden with Adam. And so we observed this, and we observed how history itself absolutely mirrored the measurements given for that mercy seat. This event happened, exactly in a period of time that was in direct accordance with the measurements given for the mercy seat. And that mercy seat was, 1.5 wide and 2.5 long, and it was covering over the ark. And, we looked at the history, and the ark of Noah being 1,656 years from Adam, and that from that time to the ministry of Jesus was 2,484 years, which is 1.5 times. And from the total length from Adam to Jesus was 2.5 times that, 4,140 years, 1,656 times 2.5. Not only that, every little subset in there, from Enoch to Noah, the time from the ark to Moses, the time from Moses to Jesus, all are the same 1.5 times 2.5 because they're all cyclical. They're all part of, like, if we notice how 69 observed years is the same as 70 prophetic years. So, the 1,656 years from Adam to the ark is really 1,680 years in prophetic. And what is that? Well, that's, how many in a week? 24 times 7 is 168, so 1680 is like, 10 times that. The 2,484 years between the flood and between the ministry of Jesus, that's 2,520 prophetic years. Well, guess how many prophetic days there are in 7 years? 360 times 7 is 2,520. So exact same amount. It's cyclical. It's the sevens being repeated and repeated, and higher fulfillment, higher fulfillment. The Sabbath, the Jubilee. So these things, and we haven't even got into all the details of this yet, but they're exactly when these things start, when they end, and it's because it's all prophetic, it's all cyclical, it's all showing the last time generation. Every person who's ever lived from Adam to you in this generation has lived and died according to my exact schedule, my exact timing, especially all those that were called by God, for sure anyway. They were born, their kingdom started, their ministry happened exactly according to the same pattern that was given to Moses 3,400 years ago. Given to this um, this guy in the desert that went on the mountain with God, just this nobody, that was really a somebody. He was educated by the highest education with Pharaoh, and he was a man called by God, a man called the friend of the Lord. But this, he wrote this, he gave this pattern for this tabernacle, including this ark and everything else, and all of history unfolds exactly to that pattern, exactly to that pattern. So it's a big, big deal. And the times we're living in is a big, big deal. And I have this urge to tell you this today, that times are changing, times are getting close, and for good and bad, for fulfillment, but also preparation. It says in Revelation 11:19, the Ark of the Covenant was observed by the end time generation. That it says that the temple of God was open in heaven, and they were seen in the temple the ark of his testament. This is the same chapter. This is 19 verses later, where it tells us to go measure this thing, measure, observe it. End time generation, measure this. Here's a rod, and it says 19 verses later, the temple of God was opened in heaven, and seen in the temple the ark of his testament. And there were lightnings and voices and thunders, earthquake, and great hail. And we see that ark open up. We see the commandments inside there. We see the budding rod of Aaron. The man is inside there as well. And on top is the mercy seat, the place where they sprinkled the blood, and so it's all, and I've shown you this before, when we plot this time, starting back here, this is the time from Adam to the ark. And this is the different periods in there. We have the time to when Enoch was called. Remember, Enoch is the seventh from Adam, and he was taken without seeing death. So we have that little timeline right in here, the time of the flood, and the timeline in between it. That's this first circle. The second circle is exactly the timeline between the flood and the ministry of Jesus. The third circle is the exact timeline from Adam all the way to Jesus, the 4,140 years. And this last circle is exactly the time from Adam to our generation. It's all cyclical. So this big circle is where we're at today. The cyclical time of the fulfillment of prophecy is where we're at today. So this idea of restoring all, restoring everything from the beginning, that's where we're at, and that's our opportunity. And so, so personally, we have this opportunity to ask God while we're in this generation, while we have such blessings promised, to restore in our life our joy, our things that have been lost, our reputation, our whatever it is, for God to restore those things in our lifetime, so we can enjoy a more prosperous life while we're waiting for Jesus, but also as a church, as a group of people, of believers, to help us receive more so we can share more and add more to the kingdom daily in boldness, not being afraid. It says pursue, and that's what we need to do. We need to pursue this, getting our message out, getting our, if you're, if you're, like um, funding the ministry, working in the ministry, we've got, so many, Sandy and Chris do so much work that no one even knows, and just quietly go about it all the time. They could use some help, so, um, anyway, we're in this together. And I just hope that you can be encouraged from this message that God wants to not wants to will restore all, but he wants us to see that he wants to do that for us too, and that he will do that. He wants us to have that faith, because that's what was robbed from man from the beginning, that faith, that trust in God's word. Lost the inheritance, lost the intimacy, because somebody that was a father of lies and has spoke no truth, somebody that wanted to hurt us and to rob us of our inheritance, um, said the opposite, called what was good evil and what was evil good, and so that and that's all it was. There was no evidence. There's no just rhetoric. Just what God calls good, I'm going to call evil, and what God calls evil, I'm going to call good. Just to stand in opposition between God and his people, put doubt in people's mind, etc. But now is the time for truth. Now is the time for certainty, and now is the time to pursue. And I hope that we'll be able to do that together. So with that, my time's up here. So I will stop share, and we'll have a minute or two for some questions if there is any.
Thank you. Another good one. It's amazing how everything fits together and how the end is coming.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that was good. That was very good. And it did kind of tie into what Ryan was talking about too. And as you're talking about listening to David's conversation with God or with Jesus,
Yeah.
it's very beautiful because Jesus and his Father, they want to help us so very much. And like you said, Satan comes to kill, steal, kill, and destroy. And so David asked you, he says, shall I pursue I think it's the Amalekites? And Jesus says, yes, go, and you'll recover all. So, they want to work with us so much. They want to abide in us,
Mhm.
guiding our minds and helping us. And they want us to recover everything that Satan's continuously taking away from us.
And think about the mercy of God here. David has not inquired of the Lord for a long time. He's living with the enemies. He's
Mhm.
he's given up really. He's the anointed one, but he's raiding, other countries or whatever. Then he gets rejected by those people, and he's disappointed. Like, what do you mean I'm not good enough here? I'm not going to betray you. So then he's on his way home, and everything's aflame. And now his men are so upset because he's their leader. You got us into this, and they were going to stone him. And so he's not having thinking in his mind, "Oh, I've got great favor with God right now."
Mm.
But he knew that the only thing that had ever strengthened him, the only thing that had ever comforted him through all his trouble was the Lord. So he strengthened himself in the Lord. And the Lord didn't say, "Oh, no, well, even a bad boy, even, he said, pursue. I assure you that everything that was stolen from you you're not going to lose a thing. Pursue." Because God knew how he got himself in trouble. God knew the temptations. God knew, Saul was pursuing him, and David was, just a man. He was a great man, but just a man. It was right after this when Saul died the very next chapter. So David wasn't being persecuted anymore. David was made king. So this is a turning point in David's life, the turning point in his kingdom, the turning point in Israel's history. And it wasn't when David was being good, but David knew enough to just like God wanted him to have that faith. God wanted him to have that, look, David, this isn't about your righteousness. This is about me, and I will not have my future king be robbed of his reputation, of his, everything. You're gonna get everything back. So I just love that story.
Yeah, it is a very beautiful story.
And
Yeah, and
sorry to say, if you compare Christianity today with its height, back at the time the world was first evangelized and the disciples and all this stuff, it's so watered down now. So really, we're at that point too, where it's not because Christianity has been so faithful and so, there's a very small remnant that seeks, the biblical truth and sees it as good and not evil. Sees the law as good and not evil and stuff. But 90% of the Christian worldview wants to suppress that truth and suppress that law and call that law evil. And so it's a time when absolutely God's going to do his miracle. He's going to take that little group of people and boom, around the world, that message is going to go out and be adopted and be accepted and for good reason too, just because there's evidence of it. People aren't going to have things shoved down their throat. There's evidence that they're going to be seeking it because where they look or everywhere they look around, they're going to see evil and they're going to want to taste good, you know, and they want the truth. So yeah, so that's why I said like when Ryan was speaking, and he talked about things being cyclical, happening again and again, and like those seals or things, and things being one's a consequence of the other, and that's what all of prophecy is. And people don't understand that it's cyclical. It's not a one-time event. It's ever increasing. So when you're at the end, that's when the big thing happens. And we're at the end. So our expectations should be very high. That's what it's all about.
yeah,
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 Brent, I really appreciate that you are pointing that out, how cyclical it is. I'm going to be sharing Ellen White quotes on that in geology. And
Well,
I think
good.
that what you were saying, about waking people up, yeah, that's going to be a big part of it is things going on around them, the evil going on around them, but also the natural things going on around them
Oh,
too.
absolutely, because those put the fear in your heart. And that's when you wake up.
yeah. That's very good. Maybe Brent, hey Ryan, I don't know if you've looked into this covenant code stuff much with Brent, but it's super intriguing, and I hope it. Yeah, Brent, I hope you go down the rabbit hole again soon because the more you talk about it, the more it sinks in.
Yeah, next week
Um,
we'll be doing, that's why I wanted this week to kind of just set up the fact that
okay.
it's now time to be bold and now time to be get into things, So yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, because that is a very big deal. And if you are a Seventh-day Adventist living in 2025, I would highly, highly encourage people to look into the numbers that Brent's talking about, because it really does point to the seven angels
Yeah.
in our day and age, in the future. It is present truth.
Yeah.
And it's not um, silly stuff to set aside. It is very important stuff.
Well, a lot
But
of it
yeah,
also
helping
goes
church.
right along with what Ryan says too. And his
Yeah.
studies in geology and everything, they just all blend together. It's amazing how God brings all this. So I appreciate all
Well,
of it.
Yeah.
I sent out talking about dual application. If you've watched my presentations, I talk about dual applications and prophecies being repeated all the time. Yesterday, I sent out this email from it's an article from the BRI, and there's three things at the end. Let me read number 2. The Ellen White writings contain no dual fulfillment principle hidden in random paragraphs to support the current practice of reapplying certain prophecies of Daniel and Revelation to the present scene. And then I used an example of one of the things that she wrote. And that there is one of the articles right at the beginning of the BRI's website. It was a non-Seventh-day Adventist that brought this to my attention this week. And it's too bad that the Seventh-day Adventist Church, the leaders, don't see these things.
So
Or
what do you
they at
think,
least
Keith? So they
they
were
deny
saying,
them.
so they were
Huh?
saying, so what were we saying? So they were saying that that Daniel doesn't apply to today, or
Well, they're at the odd, but the article was told people on this email, and I'll send it to you, Brent. Under the conclusion, there's three things, and I didn't put that. Let's see here. Let me go down to the conclusion here, and the first conclusion was Ellen White clearly endorses a historicist method for interpreting the prophecies of these two important books. That's Daniel and Revelation.
right?
And number 2, it says the Ellen White writings contain no dual fulfillment principle hidden in random paragraphs to support the current practice of reapplying certain prophecies of Daniel and Revelation to the present scene. And then there's a number 3 where it
It's
says Ellen White disavows attempts to give such prophecies a dual fulfillment. And it's like these people have never read any of her writings.
My dad had a lot of stuff about repeating, history repeating, and how Mrs. White said that over and over and over, and people argued with him, but it's like it's there. It says it.
Yeah.
But
Thanks for that
then I go in
website, Brian.
then I go in this email, and I have one of the quotes from Mrs. White from the Review and Herald, when it's also from letter 103, and I know Ted Schultz quoted this once, and he was in Bible Explorations,
Yeah.
where it says in there, much of the history that has been placed in the fulfillment of this prophecy will be repeated. And this is just one of the places that I have said this. So when you talked about this, Brent, that there's, she talks about it all the time.
You can't understand prophecy without realizing it's an ever increasing, thing. I mean, the first seed of the woman, like what did Eve say even when she had Cain, that she's, man is, God has given me a seed, and then when Abel was killed, God has given me another one to replace the other seed. So she sees the birth of her son as the fulfillment of that prophecy. Now she wonders, is this the Messiah? But she realizes it's her seed, you know. So that's when it's first fulfilled. But it's and that's when the godly line starts to go down to Noah, and then all the way through to Abraham, and then Abraham is told specifically about your seed, you know, and and what was Abraham's problem? He couldn't have a son. His greatest desire was to have a son. He couldn't even have one son, but it was his seed that would be blessed. So this whole thing, so it's a very important concept that continues to increase until, you know, as Paul points out, it's the seed capital, meaning the one, you know, not, you know, so it's until that seed. So it's, you know, and then even with the Messiah, there's certain things will be fulfilled in his first event and certain things in the second event. So it's this long history of fulfillment of the promise that began in Genesis 3:16 to restore what Satan had stolen, you know, restore and all that he had stolen. So you can't see prophecy any other way because that's just the truth. That's like looking at data, you know, like, you know, Ryan's a geologist. He looks at data, you know, and when you see it, you can't unsee it. And you're the same way. I mean, the whole I was going to say I didn't have time, but during my presentation, I was going to say that because you know, like, so and I just see this happening greater and greater, but so you got Abel, you know, Melissa, Keith, Chris, like you know, now uh, Sheldon and Ryan and all these different people with different angles that are all important. They're all different. There's no kind of there's not like two Keiths or two Ryans or two Melissa. Like it's different things that and those are the things that each apply to people for different reasons and different things. So that's what makes the ministry so much more interesting is when like-minded people that are non-repetitive work together, you know. So I mean, I love geology and all that sort of stuff as well, but you know, we can only each pursue so much in our life, right? So it's good to benefit from somebody else who's done that. And Keith, you know, you study a lot about Ellen White's writing and about historical Adventism and about things in the world and things that are, you know, historic, you know, occult things and I mean just different things. Like, but they're all important. So anyway, I love it, and I was really blessed today. Thank you.
Yeah, I was curious, Keith, the article that you're referring to from BRI, is that a more recent one?
I'm not sure how recent it was because there's no author applied to it, which is what the guy
Oh.
was saying. There was no one particular thing, and so I don't know if it's the basis of the BRI. But the title of it is about Ellen G. White and her writings, and there's a long article, and it goes about the historists, the preterists, all that. But I went down and talked about the conclusion at the bottom of it, and there's three things, and it's like the people that whoever wrote this, it's like they don't know the things that she wrote.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Yeah,
and
because there was a paper by BRI that I found at the 2005 GC conference in San Antonio, and it's still on the. I shared that link in the chat just now, and it's overly academic, but it's about what they call recapitulation, which is basically the cyclic nature of prophecy.
yeah.
It's Eckhart Mueller, and he's talking about how there is, you know, a repetition and enlargement in prophecy. So I'm kind of wondering if they've gotten away from that more recently in this new article you're talking about, because I'm not familiar with
Well,
it.
I sent it to Sandy and Chris yesterday, but you know there was there was a person that spoke at Bible Exploration who was removed from, I think he was a pastor, but he was removed because he said that there was going to be a future 1260 days, which is why I started studying Daniel 12 and Daniel 8 as a future application back in 1982, when I said that there's going to be a future 1260, 1290, and 1335 days. And I've been saying this ever since. And I don't do away with the historical applications. Just like the future 2300 days, I do not do away with the historical application of it. I say these things are going to have another application.
Well, that's good to know that I can share that because I found some reasons to support that with geology and astronomy. So
I
maybe
sent
we'll
you
get
the
there.
email.
Thank you. So you say he got dismissed, he's an Adventist pastor, got dismissed as an Adventist pastor?
Yes,
Do you remember his name?
I don't remember his name.
Okay.
Sandy would know. It was a black man and his wife. They both spoke.
Oh, I remember them.
Sardis? Not Eugene.
Huh?
Not Eugene.
No,
Sardis?
it's not Eugene. It was before. I don't remember his name. And she has a PhD, I believe.
You're not talking about Brainer.
She was a
I re-
counselor.
I remember who you're talking about, but I can't
You're
think of
talking
their
about
name
Brennan.
either.
Yeah. Because I went up and spoke to him about that, about the reapplication of a lot of these prophecies. And I did a whole on someone mentioned Jerusalem. I did a whole presentation called The Destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70 and in the Future. Mrs. White says that that's going to have another application. And she, not just once, she mentioned that a whole bunch of times.
Keith,
which
are
I
you
did
talking
in
about
that
Brainer?
Huh?
Are you talking about Brainer?
That could be who
Esme and
they
whatever
are.
his name was.
Yeah.
If it's them, they've gone way off. Way
Yeah,
off.
but that's not, that was why he was kicked out, was removed, is because of a future. He applied some of these things as having a future application, and I think he got that from David Gates. But they just used the 1260 days. That was it.
Connie's asking a question, or Barry, one of them.
Pastor Lynn, no, I don't know them.
He's got some really good stuff out on the internet on a site called Daniel 12 and the Pink Elephant.com. Really good.
Who's that, Conrad Vine?
No.
Oh, this person?
It was Arthur Brenner. What was his name?
Well, I'm going to sign off, everybody, and we'll see you next Sabbath. And hope you have a good rest of your day. And thank you again, Ryan, for sharing.
Yeah.
We look forward to next week.
Absolutely.
Anybody else have anything you want to say or continue?
Just I know after our first Civil War, I know Ellen White said that we would have another one. So that just goes along with everything we've been saying. She said we're going to have another Civil War. So.
Well, I wasn't going to bring this up, but on my Monday and Wednesday Zooms, they was bringing it up. There is a book called 50 Years in the Church of Rome by Cheneke. And according to Cheneke, who was a personal friend of Abraham Lincoln, because Abraham Lincoln, before he was president, went and represented him in court where the Catholic Church tried to set up Cheneke, and he proved that he was innocent. And he was a Catholic priest. And he told Abraham Lincoln, they're going to kill you because you got me off. I deserve what was coming to me because I had sworn an oath to protect the Roman Catholic Church. But he came out in that book, 50 Years in the Church of Rome, I believe that was a book, that the Civil War was not over slavery. The Civil War was brought on by the Vatican and the South, and that that if there would not been a civil war had it not been for the Catholic Church, and it was resolved over slavery, but that was not the cause of it, according to him.